So I put this one up there less as a math problem and more as just a question to think about. How do you figure out the markup if some of the product will spoil before being sold, or if there's a chance that the product will spoil without being sold? Well,
factored in before it expires?
Exactly. And first thing we need to understand is we need to talk about spoilage factors or spoilage rates.
Is this just food for thought, or is this actually?
No, this is now actually math. So now, let's say that we have, I know late at night this is cruel, 200 brownies.
It's not cruel for me, I hate brownies.
Oh, there you go. Well, then you're the one that contributes to this factor. 15% will spoil without being sold. Not in my house. Huh? By spoil, spoil doesn't necessarily mean moldy or anything like that, but a bakery will set a standard of if they sit there for more than so long, they start to dry out and get a little, so they're no longer considered fresh brownies. So what that means is we have a number that's sold and a number that is considered spoilage. For the younger people in the crowd, that's not hashtag sold and hashtag spoiled, by the way. The number sold is 200 times, well, 15% spoil, what percent sells? 85. Very good. 100 minus the 15 gives us 85. So it's 200 times 0.85 is 170 brownies are sold. Now I could just subtract from the 200, but 15% spoil, so 200 times 0.15 is 30. That's spoil. So out of a batch of 450 rolls, 18% will spoil. Find for me the number sold and the number that spoiled. So this is not so bad. It's going to be 450 times what for the number sold? 0.82, and what's that come out to be? 369 that are sold. And for the number that spoil, 450 times 0.18, which is 81 spoil. So that's the easy part. Now we get to combine this with what we were doing at the beginning with markup on cost and markup on selling price. To keep it simple for this, we're only going to look at markup on selling price for these. So let's say that 300 cookies are produced at a cost of 20 cents each. %25 are expected not to sell. Now, by not selling, I'm saying that not will they necessarily spoil, but of course with cookies, the big danger is breakage. Yes, they get broke or chipped or whatever. Or oddly shaped when they're baked, or for some reason they don't make the cut. You need a 30% markup on cost. Find the selling price. So this process changes just a little bit. The first step here is to find the total cost. So here we have 300 cookies times 20 cents each. That's a $60 total cost. Step 2 is we're going to use that markup concept to find the total selling price. So now we're back to our lovely table. Cost plus markup equals selling price. We know. Now what's going in here now is not individual cost, but total cost. So the cost on the dollar side is $60. We said we needed a 30% markup on cost. So the 30 goes percent side of the markup. 100 goes on the cost. This number is going to be 130. We're looking for the total selling price now. Don't need the middle row. So 130 times 60 divided by 100 is $78 is our total selling price. Step 3. Step 3 will change slightly depending on a secondary market. For this case, we're assuming no secondary market. That's what I was going to say next. What does that mean? Spoilage goes in the trash. So those broken cookies get dumped in the garbage. Or more likely they go home with the employees. A lot of times they'll break them up and put them out on a tray and then give them for free samples for somebody who wants to try them or whatever. They're used for things that are non-money making. Put it that way. So when
75% of the store expires?
what's that?
Well, I always wondered, like, let's say 90% of the items expire, so you bought them, you throw all that away.
You have to, yes. And then you go to the person who does your ordering and you wring their neck. Because somebody didn't have a feeling for. That's actually why seasonal stuff is so tough. Like, for Thanksgiving, turkeys, and Easter ham, whatever, Christmas. Because you never know what the fat. Like Christmas is a hard one. Thanksgiving turkeys are pretty predictable, but for Christmas, you never know what families are going to go with turkeys or ham or whatever. So how much of each do you order? You don't want to sell out because you're going to lose sales because people that came in looking for them and they're all gone. But you don't want to have a lot left over because you're going to have to slash the price to get rid of them after the season. Because not too many reasons to cook a turkey in February. So, there's a lot of consideration there. The seasonal stuff is really tough to figure. So anyway, step 3, when there's no secondary market, is to find the number sold. So here there are 300 cookies times 25% didn't sell. So that means what percent did sell? 75%. So times 0.75, which is 225 cookies. Sold. Step 4 is find now the required selling price for the items sold. Basically what they're saying is the ones that spoiled are nothing, they're a total loss, but they still gave us a cost. We have to recover our cost plus our markup from the ones that actually sold. So we require a $78 total selling price. We're going to divide that up by the 225 cookies that are actually going to make it to the customers. So that is 34.6 cents, so 35 cents. So those cookies go out there for 35 cents a cookie. Now, again, there's a lot of unpredictability here. The spoilage is always unpredictable. The 25% is always an estimate based on past experience. So if it's a new product, that's really a guess. Usually base it on related products. So let's look.
Is this something that you try to figure out before you even put your cookies out? Like you're like, hey, in the past we've usually lost 25%, and that's why you've raised the price instead of being 20 cents, you've raised it to 35.
Yes, you would. The first batch of cookies you make, you'd take a guess. You would make a guess of, okay, I'm guessing that 15% of them are gonna break or whatever without being sold. So then you would set this price based on that guess. But then after that, you would adjust it and say, okay, you know what? I've made a few batches now, and it's more like 20% than it is 15%. So I'm going to adjust my price.
I didn't know it fluctuated that much.
But you couldn't fluctuate that all the time, could you? Like 1 week they're 35, 1 week they're 40, back down to 20.
This is a little off topic, but what you just mentioned there is an engineering term and a business term called tinkering.
Sure.
Tinkering sounds like a cute thing that an old man does, but tinkering is very, very bad when it comes to business and engineering. And what that is basically over-adjusting. Basically, you never let tomorrow determine, or you never let yesterday determine today, or never let today determine tomorrow. You don't go one day at a time. You take a large window. You let what has happened over the last several months determine what you're going to do tomorrow. Because today, let's say that today you walk out of the kitchen and you drop a tray of cookies. And a whole tray just got busted up on the floor. You can't raise your price tomorrow to make up for that loss today. What you can do is at the end of the month, look back at the month and say, okay, for this next month, I'm going to have to raise my prices a little bit because losses seem a little high. But you do also adjust for what's called outliers. Let's say that you've been making these cookies for a year and you only had that 1 month. Now, this is a statistical term. This is where the statistics from the beginning of this unit collide with this merchandising side of things. Let's say that you've been making these cookies for a year and you've never dropped a tray of cookies before, but this last month you did. You can be relatively safe to assume that I'm not going to drop a tray every month. Well, let's say you've been making these cookies for a year and about every month you've dropped a tray. Well, then now you do have to adjust for that. Or get some sticky gloves or something. But you do have to, so you have to decide, is this an unusual event? Unusual events. In other words, you can't expect it to happen regularly, so therefore you're not going to adjust your long-term price for an event that doesn't happen very often. Or maybe it doesn't happen, maybe it only does happen once a year, but it's a big enough loss when it does happen that you're going to raise your price slightly, but you're not going to raise your price based on the month. You might base it on the whole year to account. So you got a little bit of a margin so that over the course of the year, you'll make up that big loss. You're not just trying to make it up in the next month. So there's a lot of things.
Sort of like when,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like when they decided to raise the minimum wage, and McDonald's goes, oh, we can't just across the board like raise everything, so they kind of like figure out where they're going to make up that cost.
Well, that's a lot of times why you see minimum wage get raised. And now there's people sitting there that have worked there for like 5 years and are making 5 cents more than the new hire off the street. Because, they usually make up for it by not raising everybody else proportionally. Let's have you guys try one of these now. So let's say you bake 150 loaves of bread at a cost of 45 cents each. %, are expected to not sell. Again, maybe they collapse a little bit or get smashed on the shelf or they sit there for too long. That's why the Wholesome Bakery used to have the day-old bakery. If they don't sell it the first day, they put it in a different category. You need 40% markup on cost. Find that per unit selling price. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to try that. Let's see how you're doing on this. I know a couple of you haven't had time to finish, but that's okay. Our first step is to find the total cost. So 150 loaves times 45 cents a loaf is what, 67.50. I couldn't remember what popped up on my calculator there. So total cost. What's step 2? You bet. Do the markup to find the selling price in our chart. Cost plus markup equals selling price. We know our cost is $67.50. We know our required markup was 40, right? And that was markup on cost, so 100 goes in the cost. Selling price would be 140. We want to know, of course, the total selling price right here. So we can disregard that middle row. At $94.50 after we cross multiply. 140 times 67.50 divided by 100. This $94.50 is that total selling price. What's our next step? Number sold. So we have 150 loaves. What percent spoils? 20%. So the percent sold is 80%, so 0.8. That's 120 loaves sold. Step 4.
94.5 divided by 120.
Got to find that required selling price. So it's the total selling price of $94.50 divided by the 120 loaves that sell. It's 78.7, so 79 cents. What those loaves would be sold for. Any questions there? Of course, you know me well enough by now. Oh, go ahead.
I was just wondering, it's like, if you know the market value that you can get like $1.50 for your loaves of bread, what is that called then? You know, is that just like,
that's called economics. There's in the economics, the prices are set. You know, this is setting prices based on your need. This is basically setting a minimum price. You know, you need to cover your costs and your overhead and make a small profit. So this is setting your minimum cost. Now, there might be times where you know, in an economic situation where you would sell below your minimum cost. So basically you're selling at a loss. But there's reasons why you would do that. And I'm not going to get into that. Just that's an economic discussion, but there are a lot of good reasons why you would still sell at a loss, but mathematically we're not going to get into that. So let's say that again, you bake 300 donuts at a cost of $0.25 each. You expect 30% to not sell. You need a 60% markup on cost. Here's where the difference comes. You will sell the spoiled, I put those in quotes because spoiled doesn't mean, you know, moldy. It might mean they had a defect in them or broke or just sat there for the whole day and got a little less than fresh. You will sell the spoiled ones for 20 cents each. I'll make a little note here. Guaranteed. What do I mean by guaranteed? Well, that means you're going to get the 20 cents and you're going to sell them all. The reason for that is if you don't have a guarantee there, then it's really, really tough to figure out. You could bring in only 80% of those are going to sell or whatever. I don't want to get 2 or 3 levels deep into the spoilage factors here. Let's just figure that you're going to throw them in a tub for bear bait and you're going to get 20 cents out of all of them. no matter what. This is that secondary market we were talking about. Remember, the secondary market won't affect us till we hit step 3. So when we get there, I'll show you how that affects us. But we start out the same way. Total cost, 300 donuts times 25 cents each, $75 total cost. Use our markup to find our total selling price. This is a 60% markup, right? Yep. So we know we have a $75 total cost. We know we require a 60% markup. And it's on cost, so 100% goes with the cost. So, selling price is 160%. We are looking for the total cost. We do not need the middle row. And then we'll cross multiply and divide. 160 times 75 divided by 100. $120. That is our total required selling price. Now step 3, remember, is going to be slightly different because there is a secondary market. But step 3 still involves finding the number sold. But now it also involves finding the number spoiled. So how many were produced? 300. What percent spoiled? 30%. So that means 70% sold, right? So 30 times 0.7 is 210 sold. We're going to circle that because we're going to need that in a couple minutes. Well, in a few seconds, actually. So that's the sold. Spoiled. 300 times the 30% that's spoiled means 90 will spoil. Yes, I do mean step 3B. There's an extra little sub-step here. I'm going to call this just secondary market recovery. This is part of your cost recovered on the secondary market. Each of those 90 that spoiled are sold at 20 cents each. So that means you recovered $18. Does that make sense so far? So now step 4 is to determine your selling price. But before you get too carried away, we need a total selling price of 120 up here. But we are anticipating a recovery of $18. So 120 minus 18 is $102 that we need to get from the ones that sell. So we still have the 210 here that sold. So this will be the 102 divided by 210. So $102 divided by $210 or 210 units sold. Looks to be 49 cents. So those donuts have to sell for 49 cents each. Now, some people might say, well, geez, that $18 on the secondary market, just count that as extra profit and don't worry about it. But if you're in a competitive situation, saving that penny or so off of your unit price might be the difference between sales and getting beat by the competition. Want to see one more example? Sure? Okay. You purchase 40 shirts at a cost of $6 each. You expect 25% not to sell. You have an assortment of colors depending on the year. It's hard to predict which colors will sell, which colors won't, stuff like that. So there is usually a high non-sales rate on clothing. Unsold items will be sold on clearance for $5 each. You need an 80% markup on cost. Find what your per unit selling price should be. Normally I'd give you guys some time to figure this one out on your own, but we are running up towards the end of class here. So we'll step through this one together. You guys tell me what to do first.
40 times $6.
So our total cost. So 40 units times $6 each. The $240 total cost. And then mark it up to get that total selling price. So on our chart, we know that the total cost is $240. Your markup percent is
25%. No, also, no.
80.
80%.
It's on cost, so cost is 100. Sales price is 180%. And we are looking for the total selling price. Again, out with the middle row. 180 times 240 divided by 100 is 432. That is our total selling price. Step 3, number sold, number spoiled. Out of 60 shirts, spoilage rate we said was 25%. Was it 60 shirts or 40 shirts? It was 40 shirts, sorry. 40 shirts, yes. Spoilage rate was 25%, so 25% spoil, 75% will sell. So 40 times 0.75 is 30. It will sell. 40 times 0.25 is 10. Spoil's a bad word for a shirt, but that's our term we've been using, so we'll stay consistent. 10 will not sell. Step 3B, we have the $5 clearance rack. So we're going to take our 10 that spoil times $5 each, which is going to give us $50 recovered. So now, step 4, we have our $432 that we need to sell here. That's our needed selling price. We are going to subtract the $50 that's recovered. We get $382 is now what we need out of the ones that are sold. What are we going to do to the 382? Divide it by the 30 that sell. $12.73. So you need to sell those shirts for $12.73 each. Now this is simple. Even this, I know this is a complicated example. This is oversimplified yet, because usually there is a third option for the donuts. There'd be that third option if they don't even sell on the secondary market, so they get thrown out completely. Is zero recovery. For shirts, well, there's the percentage that gets put on the clearance rack, but there's also the percentage that walks out the door. I mean, I hate to bring up a major negative at the end of class, but that is significant in the clothing industry. So there is a new quiz that is due tomorrow, Thursday, at 11:59 p.m. That's going to be on that invoicing stuff from last week. There is a new homework assignment that will not be due until 2 weeks from today. So that's going to be due on March 29th. Now here's the big thing. This is where poor timing comes into our scheduling. Next class, which is March 29th, Unit 2 test. Well, you guys have a good night. Have a wonderful spring break, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.